Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks again for joining our presentation. Let me scroll to our next slide. So our presentation is If You Build It, They Will Come, Encouraging Student Democratic Engagement Through Structure and Inclusion. So I am Keith Lancer, Associate Director of Service Learning and Civic Engagement. Rayshon, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rayshon Eastman, Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer and Title IX Coordinator at Mount St. Joseph University.
So we're very excited today to talk about our Democratic Engagement Program at Mount St. Joseph University. So in order to begin this conversation, we just want to quickly talk about what is democracy, right? So, the United States is well known as one of the oldest currently existing democracies in the world. We've seen significant expansions in voter participation, as well as the ability for folks to contest politically. We have fairly strong political institutions. We're generally known for our respect for the rule of law and for human rights. This slide covers some of the kind of most important recent events that have significantly expanded democracy in the United States. So first would be the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Dr. Bankston talked a little bit about this at her keynote this morning. And this was a law that ended voter registration requirements that were applied unequally, as well as racial segregation in schools, places of employment, and public accommodations. So this law dramatically expanded the electorate in the United States, adding millions of people to the voter rolls. 4 years later, there was the Fair Housing Act of 1968, and this was passed just a week after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. This law prohibited the refusal to sell, rent, or negotiate with someone because of his or her protected class. And thanks to public pressure from an expanded electorate, fair housing organizers secured a significant victory in terms of civil rights. So how democratic is the United States today? So Freedom House publishes a publication called Freedom in the World annually. The report from 2020, in that report, the United States' global freedom score stood at 86 out of 1,000, 100, a 9-point drop since 2009. United States scored behind Chile, Greece, and Slovakia. The democratic institutions of the United States, according to Freedom House, have suffered erosion as reflected in partisan manipulation of the electoral process, bias and dysfunction in the criminal justice system, flawed new policies on immigration and asylum seekers, and growing disparities in wealth, economic opportunity, and political influence. Obviously, there have been a variety of other incidents since 2019, since that was published. So there was the mass protests, which began in response to the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Amnesty International documented over 125 incidents of human rights violations committed by police officers and National Guard troops against United States citizens who were engaged in largely peaceful and racial justice protests. For months during the 2020 presidential campaign, President Trump falsely suggested that the election was rigged and tarnished with fraud. And by September, President Donald Trump refused to publicly commit to a peaceful transition of power. That actually is very historically significant. Many political scientists, would argue that democracy is literally the peaceful transfer of power, right? And so this is the first time that we've had a president of the United States not commitment to that very democratic ideal. After the general election in November, President Trump unsuccessfully attempted to overturn election results in 6 competitive states by filing a variety of unsuccessful lawsuits in court, arguing that the election was stolen from him despite no credible evidence of widespread voter fraud. Obviously, you all lived through this. On January 6th, thousands gathered at the National Mall to protest the certification of the election. During the rally, President Trump urged the crowd to go to the Capitol building. An hour later, rioters faced off with police officers at the Capitol. At least 5 people died, dozens were arrested, and multiple police officers were injured. Vice President Mike Pence affirmed President-elect Biden's victory early on January 7th. Obviously, on the 13th, the House of Representatives voted to impeach President Trump for inciting an insurrection against the United States. President Trump became the first president in the United States to be impeached twice. His second impeachment became the most bipartisan presidential impeachment in history. So, democracy is strong yet vulnerable in the United States. And so let's continue to kind of focus down, drill down. Well, how democratic is Ohio? So the 2016 Ohio Civic Health Index reports highlights of various indicators in civic health for Ohio. And many of these indicators are extremely disturbing. Between 2004 and 2014, roughly 70% of Ohioans did not engage in any organized volunteer work at all. In 2013, Ohio's charitable giving rate was 46%, 43rd in the nation. In 2014, Ohio's giving rate increased to 50.6%. And while that's good, 50% of Ohioans didn't give at all. Only 36% or 34% of Ohioans reported to belong to any type of community organization in 2013, dropping to 39th in the nation for group membership rates. In the midterm election of 2014, Ohio's voter turnout was only 40%. Almost 60% of eligible voters in Ohio decided to not vote. In 2013, only 11% of Ohioans contacted a public official, ranking Ohio 33rd in the country. And only 6% of Ohioans attended a public meeting of any kind in 2013, ranking Ohio 45th in the nation. So I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Eastman.
Absolutely. So one of the things that was a point that was brought up that was pointed to as to the reason why there was fraud in the 2020 election was because of votes that happened in largely minority areas of our country. As you know that voting with minorities, historically African Americans, has always been an issue in our country. But what's interesting is, as that arose in 2020, the demographics of our nation are dramatically shifting. So our colleges and university and society is becoming more diverse racially, socioeconomically, backgrounds, and through gender. So here's a few facts. 1 in 10 eligible voters in the 2020 election were a part of the Generation Z, which is our current population that was born after 1992, which is the most diverse generation of folks in our country's history. And so the oldest of them have turned 24 in 2020, which is roughly 24 million Generation Zers had the opportunity to vote in November. And what makes up this group? 52% of them are non-Hispanic white, which is significantly lower than millennials, which was 61%. 1 in 4 Generation Z are Hispanic. So we're talking about 25%. 14% are Black, 6% are Asian, and 5% are other race or 2 or more races. Next slide, please. So what does that mean for civic engagement and diversities? That means that our students are going to work and live in an increasingly diverse society. And the universities have an obligation to prepare students for that diversity that they're going to interact with and engage with outside of the confines of our university, and hopefully within our universities also. So as a result of the changing demographics, our students' attitudes towards injustice and social justice are shifting. Students are becoming more involved in community engagement and political activity. So the work of diversity and civic engagement is significantly more important on campuses now than any other time in our history. Next slide, please. So campus should model diversity in action in the work that they do. So democratic engagement doesn't just happen in town halls. it should occur on our campuses, where students learn to engage with each other, respect each other, and engage in dialogue. The skill students need to form a better understanding of each other on campus it's very similar to what they need to do when they become citizens, right? And engage in a democratic society, right? So they have to be able to write and orally communicate, work in teams, have intercultural competency, and engage with peers that are different than them. So we need to develop models on our campus that mimic that democratic engagement that we want students to do when they leave our campuses. So, and we're going to talk a lot about this coming up.
Thanks, Dr. Reisman. So now we'll go ahead and start talking about democratic engagement at Mount St. Joseph University. So Mount St. Joseph University, we call ourselves the Mount, was established in 1920 by the Sisters of Charity of Cincinnati. Today we have 2,100 students. Our mission is educating students through interdisciplinary liberal arts and professional curricula, emphasizing values, integrity, and social responsibility. The Mount serves a diverse population. 30% of our students are first generation, 23 are minority students, and 48% are from low to moderate income families. All right, so a little bit about the successes of our democratic engagement program. Sounds like someone, if you could please mute your mic, please. The Mount's Democratic Engagement Program, which we on campus call our Democracy Program, this is an award-winning program that started fairly recently in 2015. So we've been designated as a voter-friendly campus by NASPA and the Campus Vote Project since 2017. The Mount was also awarded the Silver Seal in the All-In Campus Democracy Challenge for our 2016 student voting rate of 65%. And we were also awarded the Gold Seal for our 2018 student voting rate of 45%. According to a study called NSALV, the Mount's 2014 and 2018 student voter registration rates were the highest in the state of Ohio, 75% and 83%. The Mount had the top student voting rate in Ohio in 2014, 25%, the second highest student voting rate in Ohio in 2016, and the third highest student voting rate in 2018. So let's talk about our campus vote plan. The way we structure our campus vote plan is based off of NASPA and Campus Vote Project's publication called Strengthening American Democracy. So this is how they recommend for campuses to structure their campus vote plans. To start with an overview, right? Identify your top 3 goals for democratic engagement during the fall semester or during that election cycle. Identify your coalition. So, think about the students, faculty, staff, even community partners who might be willing to participate in your coalition. Describe your work. So they recommend organizing your democratic engagement initiatives under 4 pillars. The first one is voter registration. Next is voter education. Then we have voter turnout, and then students as voter advocates. A timeline, so they recommend highlighting milestones for your planning around your democratic engagement program. And then finally, success. So how will you measure success for your democratic engagement program? We base ours off of our NSALV results every election. Implementation of our plan is managed by me. I'm the Associate Director of Service Learning and Civic Engagement, and I do this under the advising of our Election Engagement Coalition. So we have a variety of faculty from a variety of different disciplines as part of our coalition. We have a bunch of different functional groups from our university in terms of staff that attend these meetings. We have a variety of students that are part of our coalition. So we have campus democracy fellows, student workers, students from Student Government Association, and campus-based affinity groups. And then, throughout our democratic engagement work, we always rely on community partners to help us. So we work frequently with the Ohio Campus Compact, the Campus Vote Project, the League of Women Voters, and our local government, which is the Delhi Township Board of Trustees. So our campus vote plan. Our primary goals for the 2020-2021 campus vote plan were to increase our student voter registration rate to 90%. It might seem a little lofty, but I do believe it is achievable for us. Increase our student voting rate to 70%. Again, that might seem fairly high, but our 2016 voter rate was 65%. And then we want to increase our student voting rates to 50% from the following majors. So communication, journalism, it lists park, recreation, leisure, fitness studies. We don't have those majors. That would be our health and wellness program, our sport management program, and visual and performing arts. A lot of these majors are majors that our minority students are majoring in. The primary priority areas of our plan were voter registration, voter education, ballot access, and voter turnout. So here in a second, I'm going to highlight what those buckets look like and what our outcomes were. But for this particular plan, we really placed a special emphasis on collaborations between the Office of Service Learning and Civic Engagement and the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, obviously in response to all the incidents that have been happening over the past couple of years in United States politics. So voter registration, that's our first bucket. Voter registration initiatives began with the hiring of 2 campus democracy fellows to assist with voter registration and other programs. So since 2016, we've employed 6 campus democracy fellows, 3 of whom were women students of color. So if your campus is interested in hiring campus democracy fellows, I encourage you to reach out to the Campus Vote Project, as well as your local Campus Compact affiliate, because they will be able to provide you funds to hire democracy fellows to work on your campus. When we trained our democracy fellows, we made, this is very intentional, very planned, very much on purpose, teaching them about the importance of asking every single student if they're registered to vote, and not just students who look like them. There's a great resource on the internet called Ask Every Student Toolkit. Highly recommend you use that when thinking about what are the different voter registration activities for your campus. We found that our most effective way to register students to vote is to build it into our orientation. So by building it into our in-person orientations this past summer, we're actually able to register 30% of our incoming class. That's a fairly high rate, and that happened in the middle of a pandemic when a lot of our students didn't attend in-person orientation, right? We did a variety of other voter registration events. We celebrate National Voter Registration Day every September. We also usually have a Spring Voter Registration Day. We also celebrated our last-minute voter registration day before the voter registration deadline in Ohio. And we also had a dorm storm voter registration drive to help our students get registered to vote on campus. A variety of virtual in-class registration drives occurred. We used a variety of different passive voter registration activities as well. So on-campus flyers with QR codes that help students to register to vote online. Campus-wide email reminders about voter registration. We also update information on our external and internal website to help provide access to a voter registration for our students. So there are a couple of primary outputs under the voter registration bucket that we included in our campus vote report. We hired 2 democracy fellows. We registered 96 students to vote in the fall, 162 for the year, and that was 12% above the number from 2016. We sent out 4 campus-wide voter registration reminders, and we updated our information on our websites. Then the next bucket is our voter education initiatives. So voter education at Mount St. Joseph is usually both academic and co-curricular. So academic democratic engagement occurs in places like credit-bearing service learning, honors courses, social work courses, and education courses. But in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, we really shifted gears this past fall to focus more on co-curricular and passive programming, with obviously a focus on virtual experiences. And we, again, very much tried to emphasize diversity and inclusion throughout all of our education experiences. So over the summer of 2020, we surveyed all of our students to see what topics that they wanted to talk about in the fall. So these were the top topics that our students said that they wanted to talk about: white supremacy and racism, student hunger and student homelessness, COVID-19 and healthcare access, and LGBTQ plus issues. So we partnered with the Office of Diversity and Inclusion to create our social justice forums, and we held 4 of those this past fall. Dr. Eastman, do you want to just say a few words about the social justice forums?
Absolutely. The social justice forums were critically important for our campus to engage in the critical conversation around critical issues that impact people, like, right? So we've talked about racism and white supremacy. We've also talked about LGBT issues because and so on. But the reason why that conversation is so important is because it brings awareness and it brings it to the conscious of the social condition that folks may be going through. So as folks are engaging with our democracy program and they're engaging with service learning on campus, they're thinking about it from a lens of understanding and having the space to have that conversation.
Thank you. Some other voter education initiatives. Our Campus Democracy Fellow facilitated a variety of events, including presidential debate watch parties. All those were virtual. She also promoted the Campus Compact Regional Conversation Series on race and ethnicity, and the Campus Vote Project's Ohio Student Voter Summit. During our Constitution Day celebrations, we reflected on the centennial anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, which provided white women the right to vote. According to federal law, each college and university that receives federal funds must facilitate an educational program about the Constitution of the United States. It isn't optional. The Mount also distributed the League of Women Voters of Cincinnati, their nonpartisan voter guide, both on campus, and we also posted it to our websites. So here's some of our outcomes from our voter education bucket. 126 students, faculty, staff attended our social justice forums. We had 57 students attend our virtual debate watch parties. We had a variety of folks on campus attend some of the events that we promoted. 25 students, faculty, and staff attended our Constitution Day event, and we passed out 100 copies of our nonpartisan League of Women Voters Guide. Like I mentioned before, we posted it to our website. Then we have our ballot access bucket. So while the rate of student voting in elections has been significantly increasing across the United States, so have restrictions to student ballot access. One of the primary ways in which we worked to ensure student ballot access in the fall of 2020 was to serve for the first time during a presidential election as a polling location. Right? This provided significant access to our students who live on campus, as well as to all the folks who live in our community. We provided proof of residency letters for students who registered to vote using their dorm address. Colleges can also offer zero balance bills, at least in Hamilton County, which they can also use for voter ID. At every voter registration event, we offered voter registration checks, polling location checks, absentee ballot request assistance, and absentee ballot checks. And we also did a variety of email reminders on those same topics, including being a poll worker. So here's some of our outcomes from this bucket. So like I mentioned before, we served as a polling location for our students and for the community. We filled out 12 proof of residency letters for students who live on campus, 26 for the year. A variety of information was posted to our websites. We had 43 voter registration checks in the fall, 25 absentee ballot requests, and 17 absentee ballot checks. We also sent out all those email reminders. And then our last bucket is voter turnout. So voter turnout in the fall focused broadly on social media and digital media communication due to the pandemic. So our most successful voter turnout initiative was actually digital media promotion. So this was all unpaid media. So we were featured 9 times in national, region, and local news stories. Another successful voter turnout initiative was our Campus Democracy Fellow being awarded a $1,000 grant from the Campus Vote Project. And that enabled her to purchase 250 vote masks for all the students who live in our residence halls. You see a photo of Julia right here to the right. The Career Center facilitated a Why Are You Voting This November social media campaign, and our Campus Democracy Fellow did a social media takeover using the Mount's social media platforms. It also included a very small March to the Polls event. Some outputs from this bucket. Our democracy program, like I said, was mentioned in a variety of news stories. We were featured in Washington Monthly, local news channels like WCPO, WKRC, Spectrum News 1. I already mentioned about the masks. She also was able to buy 40 vote t-shirts, which she passed out on campus. In our Why Are You Voting This November social media campaign, we were able to feature 19 students, faculty, and staff, including our president, Dr. James Williams. Our Campus Democracy Fellow completed that social media takeover, like I said before. So all kinds of great results from that bucket. So next steps. So we were surprised about how much media attention that our program received. And we think that happened because we had diverse and relatable stories to tell during this really historic and unprecedented election cycle. So while most of our democratic engagement was limited to co-curricular and virtual experiences, they were extremely well attended. So we think that more students attended these events because they were held virtually. So that's something we're hoping to continue doing in the future so we can ensure equitable access to our programs. And then just to reiterate, providing students multiple opportunities to become registered to vote really was helpful and helped to increase those voter registration numbers. And at least for us, embedding registration in orientation, literally asking every student during orientation to get registered to vote, was the most effective way for us to get them registered. So moving forward, we're going to continue to track our student voter registration and our student voting rates as seen in the NSALV study. And we're going to pay special attention to our majors with lower vote turnout and our majors with high minority populations. We also hope to start engaging our graduate programs a little bit more because right now our program is heavily focused towards our undergraduate students. And then we're going to commit to continuing to collaborate between our offices. So here's a photo from our MLK Day March and Vigil that we just had on campus. We had about 50 students, faculty, and staff join us marching on campus, saying together that Black Lives Matter. It was a really amazing event. So we're going to keep doing those kinds of events in the future, democracy town halls, and other social justice forums. And like I said before, we'll get our results from NSALV for the 2020 election here in the spring. And so we're going to be looking for our student voter registration goal of 90% and our student voting rate of 70%. Okay, so now looks like we have about 10 minutes left for Q&A, so a good amount of time. So let's see, I think we have about 30 some in our session. So that's not too many. So why don't we go ahead and have people just unmute themselves and ask any question that they might like. But I did notice there is a question in the chat, so I'm going to start with that one. Let's see. Would you quickly share the organization that can provide funds to help colleges and universities pay campus democracy fellows in addition to local campus compact affiliates? Yes. So we partner with the Campus Vote Project. That's our primary community partner to fund our Campus Democracy Fellows. They're a national organization. Most states have a dedicated staff member that's just for your state to work with, but some parts of the country have a regional operator. Just to give you a little bit of background on that, our campus democracy fellows work about 15 hours per week, and they're given a stipend at the end of every semester. So I think in the spring semester, I think it's like a $600 stipend, and in the fall, it's a little bit more than that. And our students are allowed to count those experiences as cooperative education experiences. So our students, we have an experiential education requirement, so students often elect to count their work experiences as co-op. But for the Campus Compact, the Campus Election Engagement Project is that partnership with your Campus Compact affiliate. So reach out to the Campus Election Engagement Project as well for student democracy fellows. They also will help provide some support for your campus to do that. You're welcome, Amy. What other questions do you have? Feel free to unmute yourself, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Hey, Keith, this is Jessie. Did you find that most of your students wanted to register with their campus address, or did you have students who wanted to either stay registered at home or have your help registering in another city or state?
Great question. So the majority of our students are from Greater Cincinnati, and most of them are from Ohio. So not all of the students who lived on campus elected to register to vote on using their dorm address, but it's absolutely an option for them. So we, you know, we probably have a couple hundred students in our residence halls, and this year we prepared 25 of those proof of residency letters. So that would be the kind of number that I would go with. But I would say most of the students that we helped to get registered to vote on campus, they were from states that are fairly far away, like Georgia, Florida. A lot of those states also have more stringent voter registration requirements. So for a lot of them, they just found it to be easier to register to vote using their dorm address. That's a really good question. Did I answer it sufficiently for you?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. There's another question in the chat. Do you have suggestions on how we can approach orientation staff to add voter registration to orientation in this digital environment? Or universities only offering virtual orientation for the foreseeable future? And Dr. Eastman might have some thoughts on this as well, but my initial thoughts are, I'm experiencing a similar issue. Most of the orientation promotion that I saw on campus was our in-person orientation, but I know we did have a virtual offering. I think a best practice would definitely be, at the very minimum, you know, asking to maybe include a voter registration module, you know, within that orientation. You know, if they're facilitating it through Blackboard or Canvas or something like that, go ahead and create a module that students are required to go through in order to complete their orientation online. You can embed QR codes into a PowerPoint presentation as well, and students can just kind of whip out their phones, scan the QR code, and they can register to vote online. Not every state offers online voter registration, but most do at this point. Any other thoughts, Dr. Eastman?
No, I think you pretty much covered it.
But I'm sure, you know, I've found that on these kinds of initiatives, it is a great idea to always reach out to your diversity and inclusion officer to get that support that you need, because, you know, a lot of this work is kind of outside of the box, right? It's like the first time for your university doing that, and it can be a little challenging to navigate, you know, the bureaucracy and the politics behind how decisions are made. So I've definitely leaned on Dr. Eastman a ton to help me with those sorts of things. What other questions do y'all have? So it looks like we have 3 minutes left.
I'll throw another one at you if you don't have other questions.
Sounds great.
We were going to do like a Zoom watch party for the second and third presidential debates. And after watching the train wreck that was the first one, we decided not to do that. We did a vice presidential debate watch party. Just curious what that experience was like for you and how you handled that.
Yes. So the first virtual debate watch party, we probably had maybe 20, maybe 15 students show up to that. I think they were really shocked and frankly disgusted by the rhetoric that was used and by, how the candidates were communicating with each other. We expect our students to act civilly, and they clearly weren't. So I was a little nervous about the same thing, but we decided to forge forward anyway. So I'll tell you, in the second presidential debate watch party, so the second one was canceled, so this is technically the third. We did have students that kind of wanted to do fact checking live. That was a little stressful for me because, it's great to have students fact checking, but when you're fact checking just certain things and not everything, it can give the appearance that you're providing a bias towards a certain political candidate. So I did my best to kind of steer students towards, legitimate, well-known fact check sites like PolitiFact to help them through that. But I actually found the discourse on our chat to be incredibly civil and respectful. The last presidential debate was so much better than the first one. So there wasn't as much kind of, depression that came out of that particular debate watch party.
Yeah, we had some faculty, some politics faculty sit in on the Zoom for the vice presidential debate, and they were helping with a lot of that, explaining different things and doing some fact checking. So that was very helpful.
That's a great idea. And we didn't have that. We just had students who took that on. So next time, I think we might need to do that.